Men used to go to war. Now they want their ass ate. Men used to go to war.
Oh my god, no, help me! Help me! Help me, Aranock!
Now they beg for feet pics.
The man is accused of fondling women's feet at 2.
A woman reported that he tried to caress, massage, or place the victim's foot or toes in or on his mouth without consent.
Men used to go to war. Now they bark under an e-girl's pictures. Men used to go to war. Now they're creative directors and want to be the little spoon. Men used to go to war. Now they're doing streaks on Snapchat. Men used to go to war. Now they buy strawberry flavored vape. Pink, colors, an intention. Just like masculinity or femininity, a visualization of subjective perception. Pink is the best androgynous example pertaining to the mental conundrum of Olympic pirouetting gender stigma has had its invisible yassified hands on that my ADHD brain can think of. Throughout the world and over the centuries, pink has been culturally fashioned to fit a number of outlooks, beliefs, and purposes, which have always starkly contrasted social connotations of gender on a century to decade level. In the Western world, pink had its first gender impregnation following the mid-1700s when aristocrats, these people being men mind you, wore variants of this shade as a symbol of luxury and class. Pink at this time was actually considered appropriate for prepubescent boys, as the tint was seen as a paler shade of red, which meant that it had military undertones. Colors can push societal perceptions of gender too. Fast forward to the 20th century. Nowadays, much like expressing feelings, having humor outside of bigotry, and taking care of sim characters, pink has developed into a feminine trait. In femininity, the social construct of pink has been imperialized by the bourgeoisie. Current companies use newfound womanly connotations saturated with the idea of pink in order to sell material to women like Barbie dresses, Hello Kitty, flowers, BDSM dungeon toys which needed a bit of softer refacing. But they've also been used as symbols of political upheaval. The Indian group named Gublai Gang wore and painted themselves in pink when they beat the ever-living shit out of domestic abusers.
Pink has always been a color in transition, and so have social attitudes towards it,
said Valerie Steele, American fashion historian.
The 150-year-old notion of pink as synonymous with fragile femininity brought forward by the West is being challenged. Pink is now having a cool face. It's hip, it's androgynous, it's strong, and it's here to stay.
Historically, pink has been a loaded statement, either for masculine or feminine causes. It's affirmation, a characterization of self, gender expression at its finest. Now you may be asking, Turb, why did you dye your hair pink? What does it mean to you? Are you fighting against the gender norms, which have turned Western men into emasculated shells of their once glorious hunter-gatherer, rock-chewing ancestors? Or are you fighting back the stigma associated with masculinity by becoming a figure of anti-normativity in a righteous quest to help yassified men flesh out aspects of their own gender identity? If I'm being honest with the audience, I just like the color.
That's ethical. I record like from the jump. And like people know, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's just recording. That's just like shit.
I don't know if you can catch that howling. That's my niece howling in the background. She is a dog. She is a dog, just to be clear.
Oh shit! I just made a human with a penis. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Shit, that's not good. We do a little messing up all the time.
Nowadays, if you've ever ripped a Beyblade in grade 2, tried to go Super Saiyan in grade 5, or experienced fear for the first time by playing Ding Dong Ditch on a neighbor without realizing that they were waiting by the door because you already rang it 8 times, congratulations, you may be a boy, but you're no man. If you ever double dutched in kindergarten, wrote a One Direction Wattpad specifically detailing how Harry Styles would French kiss Zayn, congratulations, you may be a girl, but you're no woman. Have you ever lifted weights, danced, went on a hike, owned a blue DSi, had a Sonic Freezy with the little gumdrop eyes, have an excess knowledge on World War II, looked at a car and said, wow, that's a cool ass car? Or opened the jar in every candle store, took a sniff, and then left exclusively just for the vibes? Congrats! You're a woman! Well, actually, no. These traits are actually pretty socially androgynous. Apparently, society is dissolving under the lack of gender confinement. I mean, men are becoming more depressed than ever before. Women are projecting their ideal cottagecore lives onto Animal Crossing characters. My dad is a Chad for having 8 mistresses in Cairo, apparently, and my mom is a harlot for taking care of me. It's true. I heard it from Andrew Tate.
If you're my friend, you just can't be a well, had a heart attack. Get the fuck up.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Trends like men used to go to war, one where women comedically depict fissures in common masculinity, or more specifically, embodiments of dominance conceding with the act of being masculine, in a sort of Confucius-esque debunking of normative gender leveraging. Mindsets like, I don't know, I want a conservative wife, all have one thing in common: the categorization of gender. By using social leverages of patriarchy, hegemonic masculinity, and depictions of femininity, these meditations of social norms, in the immortal words of deceased philosopher Rene Descartes, just aren't valid, bro. It goes without saying that in the modern day, there's a framework for masculine and feminine presenting individuals to follow. Gender rubrics which are pushed both by men and women. From birth, these frameworks dictate every aspect of a person's life, whether you choose to let it or not. And because these gender structures are so prevalent and unforgiving, they in turn serve as systems that let us judge the value of a man or a woman. Through these terms like incel, homebody, top G, golf alt baddie lover, please have my kids and marry me and step on my neck and choke me out and then put your fingers in my eye and stomp on my ear and call me a good boy, or fatherless, because that was just a fatherless, that was fatherless activity. Right, that I did, right? Meaning each individual that dares to express gender in their respective social setting inherently have different connotations under the lens of hegemonic masculinity or femininity. Is this right? Where is the line in determining
What is a man?
Does this rubric really have any real tangible social merit? Should the youth grow up indoctrinated into painting nails, putting on glitter, piercing your ears, and listening to Lil Nas X? Is masculinity just— wait, no. Isn't this just an expansion of what it means to be masculine? Why are the women the only ones allowed to have well-groomed nails and dyed pretty hair? I want to be pretty. Why can't I own a Hello Kitty Tamagotchi? I think that being a male is indoctrination in itself. This is Turb from Channel Turb, aka Alpha Sigma Theta Lord, the 5th of the Second Order, reporting from the HQ of Men's Liberation. Don't pan the camera there. Come on, that's not an earring. That's not a choker. You're looking at my accessories? It was obviously confiscated from the women's ward of femininity. Focus. There's a war going on. Men are busting it down bisexual style. Women are slaying at a rate of post-behelic guts. Everything about gender expression is becoming unclear. I mean, when we have the figure of peak masculinity being embodied by a misogynistic Eggman clone.
Why? Because I ain't gay.
And his 2 sidekicks that look like the word asparagus come to life, you could understand where we're going wrong. What does that mean? Use your imagination, catch a vibe for once in your life, you unimaginative fuck. Calm down, Turb. You said he looks like the word asparagus comes to life. Not everyone's gonna get that. Oh, okay, that's kind of reasonable. I love you. Aw, I love you too. That's a weird ass edit. I wonder how it's gonna come together. The concept for today is gender expression. More specifically, the yassification of gender expression, the yassification of masculinity, the yass of masculinity. And if you like this video, consider subscribing to my Patreon. We're only at $300, okay guys? I'm below the poverty line. So support disenfranchised, yassified black artists. Only a couple of dollars a month. Link in bio. Link in bio. Link in bio. Link in bio. Link in. What is gender expression? What is a man? What is a woman? How do we express gender healthily? Why is the concept of gender performance socially ingrained into almost every interaction, sexuality, race, and activity existing in our everyday lives? Toxic conundrums of perceived gender performity may lead you to act in certain ways that uphold ideas of non-permeable performance. In the penetrative thought process pertaining to the said idea, penetrative. Penguin, start the video.
Hi, sure, I guess I'll start the video. This is Act 1. Act 1, the Yassification of Masculinity, yeah.
Gender expression is a complex conversation revolving around social internalizations of stereotypes regarding sex and gender, Social settings almost dictate expressions of characters. I'm African and I'm a man. Therefore, when a cat walks into my house, I assume an ancestral form of understanding is being met, and thus I meow in accordance with their liking. A white woman wouldn't get that. Gender expression to her is crying to get out of unfavorable circumstances, or closing a bedazzled flip phone because she got the ick. The ick is her partner's credit score. According to the fairy intern hiding under my desk, who I pay in infant baby teeth in order to find sources on the internet. Gender expression refers to the way that a person presents their gender to the world. How a person dresses can be a form of gender expression, but it can also encompass other aspects of appearance and behavior, including hairstyles, body features, interests, body languages, voices, pronouns, and mannerisms. Gender is not the same as sex, meaning the grade 3 rhetoric of sex being intrinsically linked with gender has a lot of flaws. Sex is me and your parental guardian. Gender has connotations outside of me going Johnny Sins plumber mode, inside of your parental guardian. Not actually though. I don't need to transform into a plumber in order to perform cunnilingus with your mom. I'm black. Most of the time based on fetishization, that's just enough in itself. That's just... Why did I write the script?
Can you stop projecting and get to the point of the video?
Oh, okay. In caveman terms, sex, biological, gender, social. But there's a lot of nuance missing here that I must now front flip into like Jeff Hardy at a gender anarchist mosh pit.
35 feet!
Basically, gender expression doesn't necessarily have to align with a person's biological sex. Yes, assigned sex in the Western world has rigid social expectations and implicit stereotyping based on behavior, attire, and mannerisms of said individuals who just happen to be birthed under this white supremacist shadow realm that is America. But this social genjutsu is just a ruse, a confuzzle. Is that even a real word? Is that even a real word? I'm not saying that the implications of biological sex don't have any real power. On the contrary, combating pressures against biologically categorized expressions pertaining to sex results in very real harassments, either in social settings, by authoritative figures, between family members, in your late night runs to the gas station when your favorite cashier says you look like a black Harajuku doll come to life, and you should definitely cut it off and grow a beard. Yeah, it happens everywhere, I guess. Gender identity is the internal experience of gender. It cannot be assumed based on a person's anatomy or appearance. Meaning, as the group leader supported by hegemonic structures, I am man, I am strong, I am alpha.
I'm a pioneer, I'm an explorer, I like to eat, I like to have children, and I'm coming.
No, not really. I'm 22 and by this age you should have a defined circle. My circle is filled with people who helped me grow intellectually, you know. Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, Salman Khan, and Dora the Explorer for the extra feminist kick. But alas, I'm a man and I am black. Hence, my gender expression will be rooted in my identity as a black man. This essentially means gender expression can also be influenced by a person's gender identity, but it's important to remember that these two things are not the same. One can influence the other, but they're not the same. Just because the rigid social connotation of being a black male encompasses violent and degrading sex doesn't mean that I participate in it. My gender expression is very cis, white, hetero, rom-com, white man. I identify as Tom Holland. I buy them sushi, you know, maybe go to the beach with them. And as a surprise, get them some blue chrysanthemums from Costco because they were on sale for $30. I mean, because I want them to be happy. No, not because that's all a YouTuber with 30k subscribers can afford. No, that's not it. I'm just being chivalrous. Then we revert to animalistic sex. But I'm not doing this to women because I'm fulfilling some kind of role of black fetishization, but because I'm a hashtag homewrecker. Turb is a home record. Hashtag Turb home. By the way, do you know what sexual identity is? The next time you hit shuffle on your phone and decide to stroke or be stroked by your partner to the song Party in the USA, remember that whoever is on the receiving or giving end of this sensual pleasure, meticulously crafted by the ethereal rhythm of Miley Cyrus, is a reflection of your sexual identity. Hey guys, I'm not kidding. Try doing it to the beat of Party in the USA and thank me later. Thank me later. Anyways, sexual identity refers to who a person is attracted to. And it's also important to note what the gender binary is, because if you're like me and were priorly restricted from joining a grade 2 health class by a parental guardian out of fear that you would procreate with a classmate, here's the definition on the screen for you. However, if you want to animate that, the gender binary The classification of gender into two distinct opposite forms of masculine and feminine. Although this rubric is societally policed by conservatives and monster truck advertisements as the norm, the rubric pertaining to the cementing of gender into only two categories is flawed and restricts us into social categorizations of these norms, and as a result also restricts our gender expression into these two distinct categories. However, it is a social norm that does impact gender expression. Therefore, it serves as a backbone into explaining how certain types of people express themselves outside of the norm, either as masculine, feminine, gender neutral, androgynous, or gender conforming, gender non-conforming, etc. Honestly though, identify as whatever you want. The gender binary is a capitalist construct made to socially engineer a patriarchal relationship with men as the head of households doing money things, like doing money spreads on Hello Kitty Hellcats, while their baby mothers at home read erotic fanfics of Chris Hemsworth because their husband hasn't learned the ancient technique of giving backshots to party in the USA. My job as a cis hetero man is to support your gender expression from the outside, like artillery fire on D-Day. Go rush those socially inept Nazi norms, you gender freedom fighters. I fuck with it. Anyways, remember that the binary is flawed. Just because someone is masculine presenting does not mean they want to be identified as masculine, but there's nuance to this conversation. Socially, the gender binary and interpretation of genders, specifically internal interpretation of gender, are engraved in our minds as the social norm. Even my cis little mind can't comprehend how a man would enjoy The Notebook. Because the majority of people conform to gender binary rhetoric, most of the time, as cis people, we actually end up reaffirming these socially constricting viewpoints. Just being honest, I can't remember the amount of times I've misgendered someone, just based on physical representations of sex. And no, this is not their fault. Before I worked through my own internalizations of gender binary, my monkey brain's inherent categorization of perceived feminine and masculine physical features led me to call them she or he out of reflex, even though they didn't identify with my verbal implications of their gender. We as cis people have the privilege of being benefactors of implications surrounding gender binary norm. There's social intricacies of degradation of character, like misgendering, which we will never face. Meaning, as inhabitants of the Western world, naturally we've internalized biases pertaining to behaviors, clothing, and body language as either masculine or feminine. Pink may be feminine to you, or blue may be masculine to you. Gardening may be feminine to you. Establishing a cult of D&D members and enacting campaigns of murder, genocide, and political upheaval may be masculine to you. But we as cis people have to do rigorous and thorough unpacking of visual and internal categorizations of thought pertaining to gender norms. If not, we'll end up restricting people from expressing themselves in the ways that they want for fear of negative feedback or cause gender dysphoria. It's important to remember that even if someone is outwardly feminine or masculine appearing, a person's internal sense of gender identity may also not match their gender expression. Also, don't blame your categorization of bigoted norms on these people. That's gaslighting. No sir, no sir. Be an ally. Be a sister. Be a sister. Be a sister, I'm a sister. This may sound counterintuitive, but sometimes people internally cope with societal pressures pertaining to gender binary expression by feeding into it as a survival mechanism, even if one does not want to express themselves outside of the gender binary. The truth of the situation is that person subverting Western cultural norms will face extreme prejudice. I mean, have you ever tried playing double dutch with girls? They will skip rope over your head in such intricate figure 8 pattern, sharper than a figure skater. By the 11th time you fall on the ground, you'll be questioning if hegemonic masculinity and the modes of power that revolve around it even exist. You'll be down on the ground whimpering, wondering why you didn't just play hockey with the white kids. Trauma dumping. They literally wrote a whole movie about this. It's called like Jump In or whatever. Thank you, Disney. Good job. Anyways, research suggests that people who are transgender or gender non-conforming are more likely to face higher levels of discrimination. So when an individual doesn't outwardly express their gender, don't take it as a gotcha moment. Maybe they have family at home that's not accepting, thus they must conform as a survival mechanism. Maybe their workplace is hegemonically structured to the point that they will be bullied for expressing anything outside of the norm. Individuals whose expression of gender does not match their assigned birth sex experience more discrimination from healthcare providers, which can affect both access to and quality of care. Let me repeat that. Research has shown that gender expression can literally play a role in the healthcare that these people receive, meaning sometimes these choices to appease societal normality are literal life and death decisions. There's intricacies pertaining to gender expression that we as cis people just won't get without having these conversations, unpacking homophobia, and relinquishing our personal gender binary thought patterns. Today I brought in a cool dude, an awesome guy, a stellar man who dismantles toxic notions of masculinity while providing nuance into masculine experience outside of gender binary norms, to come in and have a chat with me.
I was told there will be postmortem tokens for this interview D&D quest.
He doesn't know this is a cult. How is the perception of gender played into your sense of self?
Like, you know, being a trans man, I have a whole lot of experience kind of at sort of different ends of like a gender binary, at least. Obviously there's more to it than that. As far as sort of how really gender has impacted my life, I felt like I didn't, because I was shoehorned into a role that was so wrong for me, I felt I didn't really get to start living my life until I acknowledged that like the role I had been assigned was incorrect and kind of broke out of it. So in a way, it really talked about, like, mentioned gender and how it's kind of playing a role. Really felt that, like, on a really visceral level.
In terms of like gender performance, a lot of black men feel this too, in terms of like playing a role that's like expected on, obviously in a very different way, you know what I mean? But like in the roles of like in capturing like a kind of sufficient level of masculinity within like our communities, you know. And in terms of gender performance, has played a big role in my life. How about you in your regard?
I think, like, as far as kind of, I mean, one, I just like, it's really liberating, isn't it? Like when you kind of, when you realize that you've been playing a role and you realize you've been kind of like pushed into something, you know, I mentioned breaking out of it and kind of setting myself free to sort of just be myself and express who I actually am. I'm trying to avoid the term toxic masculinity. I just think that, you know, like I'm kind of moving away from it, thinking of more useful things. Let's go with hegemonic patriarchal masculinity.
Yeah.
But the way that I kind of internalized that was very much when I was sort of in my late teens. I went through a very intense, like, not like other girls phase, where I sort of rejected everything feminine, and I, you know, was one of the guys, and in many ways sort of reinforced what were sort of the like dominance masculinity behaviors in the culture that I grew up in. What kind of breaking out of masculinity, or not breaking out of masculinity, but breaking out of like the gender box that I had been assigned, it gave me a lot of like compassion for people who are still kind of in it. It made me realize that for me, it was easy to break the gender box because it was wrong. So the gender box was like very, very openly oppressive. But when the gender box is right for you, like you're like, you know, well, yeah, I'm definitely a boy, definitely a man. That makes perfect sense to me. It's in a way, I think it might be harder to notice the ways that it's hurting you, because it's secure and you know it fits in some capacity, but it's not until you start like kind of breaking the weird assigned nonsense that comes with it that you realize that even if the gender fits, there are oppressive constructs that come with it that are hurting you. And breaking them open and stepping out leaves you feeling really vulnerable. It leaves you feeling really, really shitty, especially like, you know, I imagine if you come from being this guy who performs this like really sort of pinnacle masculinity, I guess the higher you are, the, you know, further you fall when you eventually that risk of kind of breaking out, right?
I feel like a lot of the groups see that masculinity's performance doesn't benefit them mostly, and it only benefits like a very small percentage of men. Performances of masculinity are just like very nuanced in that sense, and it's different with like everyone I talk to, I find. How was it with you?
That was an interesting process for me. It was an interesting process for me being someone who kind of grew up on the outside of it, looking in, and to a very, very great extent, I was looking in being like that's what I want. Why do I want that? Like I can see that it's damaging. I can see that it's hurting people. Why is that something that I crave so much? And it was actually embracing kind of my own femininity prior to coming out that sort of helped me reach a point where my masculinity was a lot healthier. And by that, I mean, it was putting aside my degradation of all things feminine. It was putting aside the fact that I was threatened by all things feminine and feminism and, you know, emotionality and expression and, you know, drink that sweet drink, wear that colorful shirt, like all of these things that we wrongly just assign feminine. I started embracing them, and it made me realize, like, one, I like these things. Two, I like them not as a woman, so what does that mean? So it kind of led me to the realization that it was fun, but it didn't necessarily fit. And then when I eventually realized, like, yes, I'm a man, I'm trans, this is what that's gonna look like, I had a much healthier backdrop because I think I had already done a lot of that work that guys who kind of start playing with gender, and well, cis guys specifically who start playing with gender and questioning gender, then have to do to kind of reach that point where they've sort of set themselves free from those negative constructs. I'd already done a lot of that just living as a woman. Let's go with that. But I should also credit, and I've brought this up before, I have a very peaceful male role model in my life. Like, my dad is probably the most chill guy ever, and he has a really kind of nice balance of sort of like very traditional masculine thing. I mean, he's a karate teacher. He's so he's always been really into martial arts. He's, you know, very, very he's very handy. He's good at building stuff. He's good at all of these things. He's a pilot. He has a lot of, you know, sort of things that like men aspire to, that men hold to high esteem. Softest, nicest, sweetest guy who has always been very good at expressing his emotions, very, very good at being there for other people while they express their emotions.
Do you have any tips or anything to like add on to like maybe men who are still oppressed under this construct of masculinity, and how, if they're trying to like break out or like trying to seek avenues of communities?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I like to recommend to guys is to ask, like, are you happy? And like to actually sit with that question for a while. And I don't even necessarily mean like, because a lot of guys are like, no, I'm isolated, I'm lonely, of course I'm miserable, I wouldn't be like out here like looking for answers if I wasn't upset. But guys who are still in that phase where they're like, you know, if I get lots of sex, I'll feel better. If I get lots of status, I'll feel better. If I get money, I'll feel better. Like, these guys who are pursuing all of these things that we have been taught, say success as far as manhood is concerned, would those things actually make you happy? Like, would they make you happy because they're things that you want, or would they make you happy because you'd have the pressure to perform good manhood alleviated ever so slightly? And is that happiness? And is it success, and is it drive if you're doing things so that other people have a certain opinion of you? Like, is that really the life that you want to live? And I mean, for some guys, maybe it is. Like, I can't make them want other things, but I think sitting there with that question for a while as to whether or not those things that we have declared like peak masculinity, do you actually want them? That, just talk to other men. Like, talk to other men about your feelings. Talk to other men about these experiences. Talk to other men about the fact that you struggle with the whole concept of being a man in the first place. Like, have that conversation. It's really scary to be the first person to bring it up, but I think that there's like just recognizing that the role that you've been assigned and the box that you've been placed in, it is shelter. Like, it is safe. And sometimes it's safer to kind of like defend your little box for it than it is to risk stepping outside of it and making yourself vulnerable. But like, there are so many things out there that are worth looking at and exploring. And, you know, if they scare you and you don't like them, all right, fine, you can go back to your box. But like, the only thing kind of stopping you from doing that is fear in a lot of ways. And no one should live in fear.
Act 2, the act of man.
This is what we act like!
To perform masculinity is to dance to a rhythm that uniquely fluctuates according to age, time, race, and situation.
The dance of masculinity could sound like a K-pop boy band to the kawaii woman gaze, or niggas with attitude to the black boys who embody the struggle. The dance of masculinity could sound like animalistic penetration to sexual objectifiers, or holding hands by the bridge for the emotionally unavailable boys. Or all of the above.
Exactly, Penguin. The point is, perceptions of masculinity differ according to the person performing masculinity in tandem with circumstance, regionality, or even sexuality. For instance, the archetype of a man is intrinsically linked to power.
Is this a patriarchy critique?
Of course. Specifically, this dynamic can be explained through the concept of hegemonic masculinity conceptualized by Raywin Connell. Hegemonic masculinity is described as
a set of values established by men in power that functions to include and exclude, and to organize society in gender unequal ways. It combines several features: a hierarchy of masculinities, differential access among men to power over women and other men, and the interplay between men's identities, men's ideals, interactions, power, and patriarchy.
Basically, men who embody notions of masculinity benefit from perfecting this dance of male exuberance for the most part, or at least to other men. The man that has the money to fly girls out every weekend. The man that's a 6-foot towering structure of pure testosterone. The man who could recall every detail of World War II with certainty. I don't think those are the men that we are hegemonically uplifting. We can agree that those men aren't always optimal, but the fact is, as toxic as these tropes are, there's an interpersonal narrative of masculine performance accompanying power that makes these images of manhood enthralling to the male gaze. But notice how I said enthralling, because these traits, as championed as they are, aren't necessarily the norm and shouldn't be the norm. Because as much as you hear dollar store pitbull market these beliefs, we gotta remember that this dude is just insecure men's Aristotle, okay? These norms of hegemonic masculinity aren't as societally tangible as they were in the past.
Turb, didn't you just say that there are ways gender binary dictates how a feminine or masculine person acts?
Yeah. There are pre-constructed notions of masculinity and femininity revolving around hegemonic and patriarchal notions, but depending on the social setting, they're not as defined as you think they are. A man can bench 400 pounds, own a Bugatti, but still have their girl taken by a skinny white boy with fluffy hair and a nick addiction. Obviously, however, hegemonic conditions are different in accordance with social setting. Black neighborhoods, where men are forced to compartmentalize negative emotions because of the sheer amount of poverty or gang violence that surrounds them, are a big example.
And if I see you in the street, I'm slapping the shit out of you.
These people are only acting hegemonically masculine because their material conditions force them to. But as a whole, we're not in the 18th century. Because of how the socialized image of a man is viewed changes over time, the question, what is a man, is becoming more and more nuanced.
I'm a man.
No, you're not. You're a penguin. You don't subscribe to the same social standards that humans encompass. Masculinity has its social subsections. Because as much habitual adherence as the connotations surrounding these ideals have faced, these social norms have had way more historical backlash. Men used to go to war and write love letters on pigeons, hoping they would fly to their loved ones back home. But now we kick our feet up while watching Lloyd fight Lord Garmadon. If Zane is your favorite ninja, then you're a Chad. That's how hegemonic masculinity works on the Turb channel. Zane supremacy. Whereas men used to champion traditional perspectives like the oppression of women, we now embody modernity. By timing our strokes to Party in the USA by Miley. Why am I doing this? If you're a true Turb fan, you'll understand that my conflictions in masculinity has seeped into my art, and what you're seeing is my socialization of masculinity taking form into weird sex jokes. I was socialized this way, so I probably won't do that again. Anyways, one of the first major public events in correlation with the question, what is a man, happened in 1902 when a 33-year-old man named Harry Gorman was hospitalized after he suffered a serious fall that broke one of his legs. See, at this time, gender was correlated with the sign sex at birth. But Harry Gorman, while in the clinic he was being operated in, was revealed to have been assigned female at birth. This revelation drew attention from newspapers across the nation, as this was a social enigma. Gorman, when asked, told the New York World,
"I wanted to be a man, and since I reached my 13th birthday, I have worn male attire. I landed in New York 20 years ago. If it had not been for my accident when I fell and broke a leg, I would still be a man."
He explained to the press that his decision to dress as a man had been made in his youth, being motivated by both a desire for freedom and a frustration with the limited opportunities available to women. And then he claimed that he knew at least
10 women right here in Buffalo who wear men's clothing and who hold men's possessions.
Harry Gorman wasn't as uncommon a story as it seems. Newspapers around the country regularly reported stories of individuals who had been assigned female at birth but chose to live as male. At least 65 cases appeared in US newspapers between the 1870s and 1930s. The trans community at this time wasn't as structured as it was in the modern day. However, stories like Harry's helped to cement the constructs of gender as social rather than genetic, and allowed for trans people to have a symbol of hope, because somewhere out there were other people like them, fighting the same constructs of suppressive heteronormative gender. These trans people living in the 1900s, contrary to heteronormative belief, were not living double lives. Instead, they were subjected to ideations of gender by their peers. All Harry did was prove that the constructs of gender aren't socially in place. In essence, he just proved that sex does not equal gender. Rather, the performance of gender is socialized in itself. Speaking of peacocks,
I don't think anyone said peacocks.
The Peacock Revolution. Did you know that happened? That was wild. That was wild. The Peacock Revolution was a historical social renaissance in the Western world, which invoked changes regarding societal connotations that strictly dictated the definition of cis man. But before Jimi Hendrix and his brocade jackets, or Mick Jagger and his crop tops, the Western world experienced the bowler hat brigade. The 50 cis men of the bowler hat brigade decided gender expression was just a female trait. I mean, who needs earrings when you're cosplaying as depressed working class Count Dracula? They abandoned their silly little thoughts of emotional fragility and thus embodied the ambiguous tough guy mentality. Remember that if taking pre-workout and calling men betas is your only means of embodying and performing masculinity, chances are you need a because no, I can't say that. Chances are the extent of your masculinity being rooted in how much men applaud you for the grunts has poisoned your initial objective. Oh yeah, the gym bros gonna love this one. The gym bros gonna love this one, right, editor? The gym bros gonna love. The absolute image of working class masculinity was curated directly because of capitalism, meaning the material conditions pertaining to the economic climate in the US forced these men to embody these caricatures of masculinity. Yeah, I know I read Karl Marx, okay? Yeah, I read Karl Marx. Don't line up too fast, woman. Don't line up too fast, woman. Because I have a girlfriend and I'm very happy with my girlfriend. Thank you, girlfriend. I won't pop her up in the video because that's... Anyways, men were supposed to be entrepreneurs and all that, but at least they weren't minting NFTs. Instead, they were just gentrifying neighborhoods in Harlem. Crypto bros, your ancestors are shaking in their 9-to-5 black evicting loafers. Following the 50s, the peacock revolution of the 60s and 70s pushed against gender roles and gender presentation. Prior to Twitter belief, Harry Styles did not do this first. And thank God, because if he was leading the peacock revolution, we wouldn't be where we are today. I sincerely think masculine gender expression would regress probably into the Mesozoic era. No man would follow that white boy's example. Look at that dress, he don't know how to rock that. Look at that dress, he don't know how to rock that. In this peacock renaissance, cis men were now able to blur social gender lines which were historically rigid without much pushback. Because when societal figureheads of masculinity who actually had influence in these spheres of masculinity, Harry Styles take notes. Harry Styles take notes. Like Mick Jagger and Jimi Hendrix, stepping out in blouses and dresses, the impressionable youth will soon follow. I call this the Playboy Cardi effect. Except instead of taking photos hanging upside down and hooking your legs around a fence like a disorientated bat, these men fought against social gender constructs in order to preserve a sense of self. No, captioning your photo, #misunderstood heathen, and describing yourself as a popular loner does not make you different, Jonathan. Put down that wumbo ass belt. You're not 2012 Chief Keef, okay? You're not that guy. You're not him. You're not Timothy Turner. You're not Timothy Turner. Clothing has always been a pivotal part of gender reclamation, though. And because of the peacock revolution, one's masculinity wasn't questioned because of the type of clothes they were wearing. City boys up 5. Nice job, City Boys. As main character-esque as a velvet blazer in ruby red looked, these fashion styles also allowed the wearer to reject societal limitations metaphorically worn in tandem with saggy, sober suits representing responsibility and breadwinning. Like fuck the system, right? Ronald Reagan is doing a toll on student loans. Stonewall is festering. Asian immigrants are being subjected to judicial unfair treatment. But at least I get to wear pink flower dangly earring, right? You know, like, yeah, masculinity has expanded its scope, at least to cis white males. I'm not saying rejecting internalizations of a traditional man is always healthy, okay? But the fact is, no matter what premise you're defying masculinity on, be it because of its dehumanizing categorizations of character, the act of expressing sexuality that would otherwise be oppressed under the rule of traditional masculinity, or maybe just because the girl you're talking to likes maid dresses. Going against these socially dictated norms have societal ramifications which you will feel while diverting from the status quo. Take me, for example. You think my 6'5" cardigan wearing black ass walks outside and is greeted like a celebrity? No! This is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, home of the white people who still support Trump. They still support Trump, and we're Canadian, and they're supporting this nigga still! Seeing a black man here is rare, okay? On top of that, I have pink hair. It's like finding a shiny legendary Pokemon on Route 1 of the Sinnoh region. That shit only has Starlies, okay? Only Starlies, okay? Only Starlies. There's nothing else here but pasty white Starlies, okay? And a flamingo, a pink flamingo. Anyways, the point is, in social settings, fitting connotations of what a man should be and adhering to gender norms is normally the most comfortable route to avoiding public scrutiny. Meaning, maybe adhering to social norms will make you seem more professional. Maybe it'll help you avoid being bullied in school. Maybe it'll make your grandma say, "Oh, look at my big boy, he's so big and he's growing and he's growing and he's so strong and he's so big." And then you say, "I've been drinking my milk, grandma, and busting it down white boy style to party in the USA. Meaning there's intricacies in deciphering what the archetype of a man means in coherence with differing social setting and interpersonal relationships. Having dyed hair as a man is cool. We love that. I've dyed hair. I'm a man. That's cool. I think that's cool. I think you're cool. We love that. All praise to Allah and Roy G. Biv on this channel, baby. Yeah. However, in terms of workplace setting, because of hegemonic masculine standards and dyed hair being socially seen as feminine, your blue bisexual liberal hair might actually be a hindrance to being hired or taken seriously in positions of power. As much as we rebel against social norms of masculinity, they are very much still active parts of everyday life that we just can't avoid. Sure, there's been historical and modern backlash, which has given masculinity itself more of a broadened vessel for us men to attempt to embody. But the fact is, we're still restricted to embodying aspects of this abstract vessel, no matter how detached from social connotations of masculinity we may perceivably think we have become. So do we blame the conundrum of masculine rhetoric pertaining to the ear-rupturing performances of hegemonic masculinity on the adhering males who are forced to dance in symphony with this orchestra of social expectations? Or do we blame the composer who conducts these overarching problems in tandem with gender binary and social scrutiny? Are the performers, being men, the issue, or the conductor, being forced social relations, the issue? Well, my answer is this pirouette of masculinity is outdated. There are healthier ways we could dance to the harmony of masculinity without looking like we have two left feet. Doing the monster mash just doesn't fit with a UK drill song, okay? Likewise, the categorization of women shouldn't inherently coincide with the act of male dominance and sex. Some things just aren't supposed to go together.
That was kind of an intricate metaphor.
Yeah.
You could have just said, men aren't choosing healthy ways to indulge in masculinity.
Yeah, and you could have just evolved into an animal that's capable of doing more than being trapped between two icebergs and starving to death while having to rely on the weakest penguin in order to save you.
Is that the plot of Happy Feet?
Well, it's definitely not Surf's Up, you rock hopper.
That sounds like a slur.
Anyways, toxic masculinity is a real thing. I'm not denying that. The fact that I can't be a man and rock a bedazzled crop top with pink eyeliner is it's a national travesty, okay? Obama, please enact the Yassification Act. I'm about to get in slay in this bitch. I'm about to slay in this bitch. This is sponsored by Fashion Intersectionality. Why is eyeliner just for women? We need eyeliner too. What I'm trying to say is there are healthy ways of expressing masculinity, devoid from inherent hegemonic norms of misogyny, homophobia, and racism. I like to call this process of joining the Healthy Boys Club the patriarchy purification process. So whenever you think of something masculine, think PPP.
There are steps with PPP, Turd.
Is that foreign?
It's Data Lord 420 Cleavage Gang. Foreign is pretty last season.
So you came here through where?
The chimney.
You're like Sam.
Yep. Ho ho ho.
Wow, that's cool, man. That's so cool. Hey, today I'm with Foreign. Today we'll be going over PPP. We'll be going over PPP because Foreign's here and we need to go over it.
I think I read extremely traditionally patriarchal. I'm a Trojan horse, so I look like what I'm not. I'm not the man that they think I am, more times than not. I look like the red pillar. Every way that you could perform masculinity, as far as just like from a very superficial level, I perform that. I have a genuine appreciation for doing that. Not only is it of course, so I'm socialized to do that. I'm socialized to perform masculinity in this way, but I enjoy doing that. I enjoy being strong. I enjoy having the long beard and being like a deep baritone that could also go up to a high tenor when I get excited. I could do that part. And I enjoy being in a position where I am protecting people, where I'm like providing and whatnot. The thing about like my masculinity and the way that I deal with it is just like I end up presenting that way, and that allows for certain people to listen to what I have to say, and then bam, I got you. Because then I could spit something that is just totally antipodal to what you expect me to say. And I think that the space, especially like in context of like the leftist masculinity discourse, there needs to be you, there needs to be Onk, there needs to be Fantastic Fox, there needs to be a person that is extremely, for all intents and purposes, ring the lunk alarm at Planet Fitness. Like, just everything about, you need to be able to see that, but you also need to be able to have different messages coming from different ambassadors of that message. I think of the same way with Hassan. With all of my different reservations with Hassan, one thing I do appreciate about him is that he does a couple things. So I mean, he takes it a little too far because like he got black nail polish. So I mean, like he's already betraying like that traditional masculinity, which is great. But if you're looking, like if you go into like a particular space with traditionally masculine men, they will immediately like be all like, okay, like, you know, he ain't one of the boys. You know? But I could infiltrate those spaces on some, you know, James Bond and get into like, you know, like real, like that's what I'm talking about. Like, get into those spaces, and then that allows for me, when I see these things, the thing is, because like men will confide in other men, very misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, all of those things, they will confide in other men, especially when they look that way, especially when they look like them. And I just feel like, you know, women, you know, and just say some like misogynoir, and that's when you have a chance to actually say, hey, it's not cool. You actually have a chance to combat that. Whereas, like, if you potentially went into that space, so Hassan even went into that space, and presenting the type of masculinity that you do, they might hide that. You see what I'm saying? They might be a little bit covert. They might just be like, oh, they might not talk about it. It's the same way how I think about the silent minority myth that they were like talking about in the 2016 election with Trump. And they were basically, when I say they, I talk about like the Republicans that did like a Republican reveal after Trump came out, you know, like they adorned the red caps and they spouted a lot of racism, a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of anti-Semitism. You'll have it. Where were you all before? Because like y'all wasn't this bold before, but as soon as Trump came into office, y'all get bold. And they were just like, well, we were always here. We just had to play the role so that, you know, we could survive. We didn't lose, so that they didn't lose their jobs, so that they were able to acclimate into society. And that's the whole point. Like, if you get around people and they are able to sublimate into society in a way that they can hide their true feelings and the things that they're embarrassed about, they never have to interact with it. They never have to reflect on those things. A person that is extremely deeply homophobic but understands and like to say like around there, say we need to go and preserve the family structure. You know, I thought that Martin Luther King stood for judge people by their character, not the color of their skin. Those are dog whistle. The same way how someone that subscribes to a toxic form of masculinity will understand to sublimate those feelings in order to get the girl or to not, you know, deal with societal rejection and sanctions. But once they get around their boys, and that's where a lot of these problems happen. And that's where like that's where the left isn't able to get in the door. That's where like a lot of this stuff keeps on brewing. And that's why you have your Andrew Tates and all. It happens in the locker rooms. It happens inside these chambers of which leftism isn't allowed to get in. So you need sometimes fellas like me, the Trojan horses of the group, to come inside and, you know, play the part for a little bit. And as soon as like we get a spot of that, gotcha.
Yeah, that Trojan horse allegory, I really liked it because in my view, like I said, as I started delving into aspects that are kind of counterintuitive to the patriarchy, like dyeing my hair and like wearing things outside of traditionally masculine, I guess, attire, I started being treated like way differently in these social circles. Like I didn't like when I was in playing basketball and I was more traditionally masculine, I really got more of those men confiding in me in really misogynistic ways. But as I'm like progressing my YouTube platform and everything, I'm noticing all my social circles, they'll always teeter around it. You know, they'll allude to it and they'll do those dog whistles. Like this other day, my friend got really heartbroken because he was well, not really friend anymore, but like he's a very patriarchal person, and like we were just trying to console him, me and all my other friends, and basically he started going into the concepts of the relationships and everything, and I was like, well, you're really restrictive in this way, you're really restrictive in this way, like put a curfew on his girl type beat. Like we're 22. Like man. We're okay, 22 yeah, we're 22. Eventually he started talking about like his healing process and what he was doing, and he was like, oh, I'm going to the gym, I'm going on jogs, I'm doing all these things which are like healthy, you know, so I didn't really look at it and be like, okay, are you delving into the red pill? But this is where it gets like kind of like conjoined. Then he starts talking about stoicism, he starts talking about like YouTubers he's been watching. I look at my friend looks at me, and then he looks at this dude, and then he's like, what are your thoughts on Andrew Tate? And then the dude said, I agree with some of what he says. And then immediately we shut him up. We're like, yeah, you're not talking anymore. You're not talking anymore. So I'm happy that we got him to realize like that was wrong. But like, obviously, I'm not the one to unpack that for him. I already went through that whole like phase myself of like discerning toxic forms of
Yeah.
masculinity, positive forms of masculinity. Because it's okay in retrospect, like if he was just like going to the gym, you know, doing traditionally masculine things, that's okay to an extent, you know. It's when you delve into a gym bro aspect with like a bunch of other men who also haven't unpacked, you know, in that space of masculinity. They're all regurgitating the same like misogynistic frames of thoughts and like working out not for themselves, but for like the idea or aspect or idolation of like getting a girl that
the aesthetic
perceivably finds them attractive because they fit this masculine role.
And I mean, even like the way that you described like your friend getting into these spaces as a way of healing, it's really important that we understand the signs. Sometimes it could be extremely clandestine and very surreptitious, the way that people find their ways into these spaces. It goes right back to FD's video on the manosphere and like how people like Abba and Preach, which are like soft manosphere figures, how they can be used as a gateway into very red pill adjacent, just straight up hardcore manosphere types. Like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, Ben Shapiro, and it gets even worse down to Fresh and Fit. In that healing process, there's almost like a fork in the road that you can go. After getting, you know, through a terrible relationship, divorce and whatnot, it's very easy to channel that feeling of rejection, refusal, pain, betrayal. It's very easy to translate that into anger towards the entirety of that group. And this could be man, female, NB, the whole outside the spectrum, in the middle of the spectrum, all over. Like, I think that this is a universal experience of which people can go down the wrong fork in that road and they can subscribe to a type of healing that is actually a radicalization. And the gym can very well be those spaces. Place like the gym, the barbershop, like trying to look better, you know, so you like start like cutting your hair and you go into the barbershop and you're doing all that stuff. A lot of these different activities and hobbies surrounding manhood can be harbors. Like I do martial arts, I do MMA. An extremely toxic space, an extremely inherently toxic space. When I say inherently, I'm talking about martial arts as an institution is conservative. It has conservative ideas. And yet again, I teeter that line. And it's also a very dangerous thing to do what I do, because especially someone like me who came from a conservative upbringing and then into a leftist one, and then trying to hold on to those leftist ideals whilst being in conservatism and patriarchy and being in proximity to that, it's very easy for me. It's like living in a cellar as a recovering alcoholic. That's like that's the best way that I could make it come across. If you are a recovering conservative, which is more times than not a recovering homophobe, a recovering bigot, a recovering misogynist, a recovering transphobe, all of that, if you're recovering from that and you're trying to get better, it's really important not to go like cold turkey and like just stop doing every traditionally patriarchal thing that has proximity to these spaces, but keep yourself accountable by putting yourself around a space and having access to a space of people that could also hold you accountable, and understanding that that's not their job because that's a lot of emotional labor, but just be in community with people that are progressive if you are a recovering conservative in this case. So me, I'm very glad that I have like people like you, people like Feek in my life. People like Bella, like I mean, like who will just like pitbull you if they see you going down like a particular hole, and they don't have to do that. Like y'all do that out of the kindness of y'all heart. But if it was not for that, it would be very easy for me to fall down a slippery slope right back into patriarchy. Extremely easy.
It's like another performance of masculinity, but with positive community. You know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of community, I guess the need to fit the kind of masculine role, it's in place like more so on us by other men. So like I do get that. How like immediately when I met y'all, you specifically, Fick, Bella, I started talking to the woman side of Black YouTube more too, like Shanspeare and Tiana and all of that. I started realizing a lot of things I was delving into, even though I thought it was healthier forms of masculinity, were also detrimental to a lot of causes. You know what I mean? The performance of masculinity, I feel like it's always a learning process, and a lot of men mistake that for just the healing process and going to the gym and finding these circles of men and just lifting to take that pain away. But no, you have to surround yourself with circles of women too, you know, that will check you, men that will check you, people that will point out when you're deviating.
It's very important sometimes to confront the reasons why you feel as though like your relationship may have failed. And I'm beginning to like dissuade myself with the idea of a failed relationship, because even if you're not together anymore, that doesn't necessarily mean that's failure. That could very well just be the logical progression of a relationship. It can be that y'all were together for a particular time and then now y'all are not romantically together. But that doesn't mean that the relationship failed. Even in this last video, like I talked about divorce in the terms of failure. And I would like, if I was doing that over, like I would like to say, like, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that because my parents got divorced was that a failure. That was a progression. Because that would also in turn that I would be a failure in that case. But no, like there's great things that came out of that relationship. There's good that comes out of a relationship that ends in a way, at least romantically, and then forms into something else. That could be beautiful, but it's also very helpful for the person and the injured parties inside that relationship to find ways to reconcile with the things that made them end their relationship if it wasn't on the terms that they wanted it to. Like you always hear people saying like, oh, I'm gonna do better, like I'm gonna find someone to make this person jealous. And then subsequent relationship to the one that you just got out of is pretty much just a trophy. It's a trophy relationship at that point. Like you're just taking selfies with this very like, I don't know, attractive person, and you're showing, hey, look at me, I'm happy. You go on these profligate trips to show that you're way better off without this person. That's all in service to someone that you claim that you don't want to be with. At that point, you're basically spending emotional, financial, physical labor, a whole person that you will get into a relationship with just to affront and offend and make someone else that you claim that you don't want to be with anymore. That's why you're on together. All just to make that person feel bad and to feel like, damn, I lost the one. It's a pathetic thing to do. And it's a dangerous thing to do to the people that you bring into that, whoever your partner is in that case. And I find that like a lot of these self-help spaces are not helping the self. They are alleyways and rabbit holes into radicalization to cause the injured party to become even more injured, at worst, irrevocably injured.
Thank you so much for coming on this talk with me today. It's always nice talking to you. Forward Stick is here, amazing YouTuber and the Trojan horse of masculinity. Subscribe to him.
Oh man.
Act 3. The performance of masculinity. It goes to show that the inherent societal expectation to embody masculinity festers internalizations of adherence towards masculinity. In children, this could be as simple as, I want abs. I want to be the fastest in the class. I want to lose my virginity. I want to get revenge on my brother for slaughtering my clan and leaving me to cope with the PTSD of having my parents lost by his hands. But this is also where masculinity can be harmful, as the failure to grasp these standards of masculinity can lead to internalized social resentment towards peers, women, or societal structures. Look at this case study, Sasuke versus Itachi Uchiha. The internalizations of masculinity festering into insecurity and resentment can be harmful for all individuals of society. Like we said, men hold power in society. So what happens when men wield this power with internalized resentment dictated towards the perceived oppressive institutions or gendered groups around them, in order to hurt the same society who have seemingly betrayed them? Well, we get people like Elliot Rodger and Plymouth. Men used to go to war. Now we stay up all night staring at the roof, fantasizing about the day that we'll find the one. Why are we sad? Why are men lonely? I mean, when my order comes back wrong, my girl cusses the cashier out, so there's a real case for hegemonic femininity over here, okay?
So women have societal leverage in your internalized social hierarchy because you have burger anxiety syndrome?
Maybe not, but how are they so brave? Statistically speaking, 6 million men suffer from depression, and that's at least like 5 more than acceptable. In fact, research conducted by the US Department of Health and Human Service shows that depressive symptoms in boys have increased from 4.3 to 5.7% nationwide. I'm so mad Drake isn't a part of the statistic. Fucking Canadians, that's not even a real place. Depression in women and men, because of social relations pertaining to hegemonic masculinity, often differ from root causes. Also, the way men cope and experience depression vastly differs from their womanly counterparts, meaning it's important to consider the impact of socialized masculinity because it does play a role in men's mental health. Girls don't go to Jupiter to quote-unquote get more stupider. No, they go there in order to gain the emotional strength needed to convey their feelings in conversational facets. Galactical love. And men go to Mars to start podcasts about the subservience of women.
What is toxic masculinity?
You should know that.
You should know that.
Yes, I'm asking you.
Toxic masculinity, other than anger, discourages displays of emotion in men while also encouraging behavior that will deem them dominant in a given situation. Have you ever watched The Boondocks?
Yeah, it's a pretty good show.
Have you ever heard of the nigga moment?
No, Turb. What's an N-word moment?
Let me educate you.
And I ain't talking book.
Was that a Tessa Brooks reference? The performance of masculinity is a fragile one. In order to portray dominance and cohesion with one's gender, this performance may lead to two men into a clash of egos.
Webster defines the nigger moment as a moment when ignorance overwhelms the mind of an otherwise logical Negro male.
The saturation of stoicism is so ingrained in the act of masculinity, we even see it portrayed in the insults we use against our male counterparts. We tell little boys who cried, "Man up." We use emotionally neglective words in order to comfort men, like "get over it," or "don't be such a bee." "Why are you acting like a little bussy?" "Why are you acting like a little baka?"
Kinda smell.
What the?
Like a baka.
"Why are you acting like a little sussy baka, man? Come on, man. Why are you acting like a little sussy?"
Baka.
Men raised in these systems of patriarchal masculinity therefore attempt to shut off their feelings or avoid them completely. We also have a tendency to disregard community and social support. In comparison to women, men typically have smaller social networks of confidence and actively practice less frequent exchanges of social support with family and friends. I mean, my method of relaying emotions comes in tandem with a talking penguin. He's not even real. Am I even wearing pants? Have you ever seen Turbo pants? I don't even think I have legs.
Bryant, Battle, and Waite, in their qualitative study of middle-aged men with depression, reported that these men described feelings of loneliness, sadness, and distress while actively seeking out emotional support, wanting to share these feelings with loved ones. Many of these men did not know how to talk about these feelings or felt embarrassed to do so. Similarly, Young and George, 2012, highlighted how some men with depression wanted to talk to family or friends about their personal difficulties, but had few or no people in their social networks with whom they trusted to share their feelings.
A lot of the time, men's mental health issues are rooted from acts of in-placed masculine performance, and thus the question of what a man is also becomes an issue of mental health. Drawing on sex role theory, we can deduce that men's social networks are limited because seeking support or discussing emotions is classified as a feminine trait, but going against the caricature of the male role that emphasizes strength and emotional restraint is commonly frowned upon. This just in, apparently crying is scaring the hose away. Women are more likely to find internal ways of coping within social circles and communicative methods, whereas men are more likely to use external methods to cope with inward turmoil and pain caused by depression. Meaning girls enact therapeutic methods of catharsis by puppeteering their sims through intergenerational trauma, thus healing their inner child. And men heal by shooting ball in garbage and yelling Kobe. Kobe. Men are also more likely to use illicit drugs. And in most age groups, men have a higher likelihood of developing a dependency on illicit drugs and alcohol compared to women. In 2019, 7% of men had an alcohol use disorder compared with 4% of women. Also, the bounds of external coping mechanisms men partake in extend further than substance abuse. For example, men's heterosexual relationships are directly influenced by how we manage our depression. Some men rely on perceived safety and privacy of an intimate relationship with a woman in order to talk about emotional difficulties as a way to avoid emotional scrutiny in their respective platonic groups. A lot of men place their emotional needs solely on a few women that happen to be present in their lives. This in turn puts a burden and a strain onto those women, when these needs that you're placing on them should be filled communally. I also fall into this performance of masculinity.
Is this story time?
Yeah, it's story time.
Can I go first?
Okay, word.
So I've been really sad ever since Mingo was thrown out.
So we got a new one. You're welcome, talking penguin. We don't need you no more. We got Mingo. We got Mingo. Also, because sex is such a quick and easy way to reap the rewards of performative masculinity, some men appease their need for appreciation by just having as much sex as they can. Regarding relationships, this act of performance maintains a hegemonic pattern of masculinity in public while still seeking support from women in private. Have you ever had sex with a woman or seen a woman for a small amount of time and ended up trauma dumping your whole life story on them? Congratulations, come join the fatherless club, we're hiring. Studies often find that young distressed men desperately want closer social connections and support from family members and friends, but they fear being judged as emotionally vulnerable, weak, and unmasculine. This discourages them from actively seeking support, leaving them at heightened risk of suicide and creating relationships revolving around one's internalized hegemonic masculinity within their romantic relationships. But what happens to men that can't fulfill this specific idea of masculinity? Be it through platonic friendships, perceived lookism, or lack of sneaky links that they think they feel entitled to. Well, an insecurity festers in conjunction with not meeting the internal goals of masculinity, radicalizing men into misogynistic trains of thought, black pill lookism rhetoric, or even worse. I'm gonna do a little trigger warning for spree shooters. The rest of the section is gonna be a little more, a bit more critical in a serious businessman type way. I'm businessman. To dive into the incel thought rhetoric, we have to understand that internal goals of masculinity are flawed. What's surprising is incels actually get this. Incels and people a part of the red pill community get that there are connotations associated with gender, which work to the detriment of men. However, their definitions of oppression are very, very patriarchal, to be frank. One radicalization of thought that can be seen mimicked throughout most of the manosphere is the inherent lack of sex that men partake in compared to women. Well, let's take one step back and ask, why is it so perceivably easy for women to have sex? And the answer is objectification. The act of being a woman is inherently linked with being an object of sexual desire. This isn't any woman's fault. It's a problem associated with the perception of femininity. I mean, we see it in all aspects of society. There are entire algorithms on TikTok and Instagram dedicated to feeding into objectification. The women we champion most of the time are mainly championed based off of sexual desirability in coherence with the male gaze. In tandem with these beliefs, there's also internal pressures regarding justifications of masculinity, or maybe even pressures from peers if you aren't having sex. I mean, the act of being a woman literally revolves around being as physically attractive as possible. This is perpetuated by beauty standards of colorism, physical objectifications, or Eurocentric beauty standards. Most men that have internalized these patriarchal incel thought processes link gender and sex so much so that could cause them to kill or hurt others in pursuit of carrying out this performance of sexual masculinity. We saw it in Elliot Rodger and at Plymouth. The most flawed concept of rationality, however, is the way these trains of thoughts label women as nothing more than objects of sexual desire. I mean, perceived categorizations of gender immediately set internal prerogatives into these incels' minds that basically say, if this woman is not having sex with me, then she's not of value. Or, if this woman isn't sexually attractive to me, then they're not a woman. You can inherently see that these groups of people correlate sex and value interchangeably in women. You wouldn't demand sex from your platonic relationships with your friends because they're men, right? Meaning the only reason why these women are being objectified is on the basis of gender relating to sexual desire. And guess what? Come close for this one. Come close for this one. You closer. No woman owes you sex, dog. Fucking weirdo. Done. FD interview, and then it's over. Let's go. And my first question is basically, what are your first experiences with masculinity growing up? Because like me growing up, my father was a very stoic image of masculinity. He was strong, he worked hard, made sure we always had something to eat, even if it wasn't like too much. And that was like admirable to a young me. And masculinity to me was growing up was always something I wanted to reach, but I couldn't because of how young I was. And things like when all the men came to the house and my mom was like, Thea, go to the basement, or all my little cousins go to the basement. And there were short glimpses of like opportunity to like prove my masculinity, like when all my cousins were like playing ball, or at church service being an altar boy and having my dad sit there and watch me, and like most of the male Sudanese community and like take pride in me doing this. And even though it was harsh, like the critique of masculinity placed on me was harsh, it made the moments of appreciation like all the more better. And it was like kind of like a toxic trauma bond. And that was like my first notion of like a masculine figure that I wanted to like embody and be like, you know.
It's interesting. And I guess it makes sense if I think about it. I have a wide variety of experiences when I'm young. So my dad, I didn't grow up with my dad. He was around a nice amount when I was younger and less around as I got older. And he was intellectual. So that was kind of like, that is probably, a very formative thing. My dad was like a computer programmer in the 70s. To put it in perspective, you know what I'm saying? Like he was one of the first people to get like a degree in computer science. And so like him being like this intellectual, type guy, was useful because I guess I had inherited some of that. I was a thoughtful, mild-mannered kid that was always observing and that wasn't always interested in being in the middle of the fray of whatever the fray was. And then I had a variety of uncles with different images and different like ways they presented. I had the drunk uncle. I had my argumentative, like slovenly uncle. It's like, I don't know if you understand, like there's a kind of a image of like a lot of Black men who like present this slovenly. So my uncle, I should say, my Uncle Mo has like teeth missing, never got haircuts, would lay in the middle of the living room and go to sleep with his ass crack hanging out, and then wake up and like be able to argue down on any political issue the current, argue down on science, philosophy, like like it was like the classic looks could be deceiving type situation. And then I have my Uncle Roland, who passed recently. I can't remember which video I shouted him out on. And he was like probably the only traditionally masculine figure that I had access to. The irony, and this is another thing that forms my perspective a lot. And you know, it's one of the reasons why like I tend to get as close to the edge as possible with like, you know, meninist, whatever masculinist stuff, is because what I realized growing up is that the most toxic masculine traits that I picked up from Black women in my family. And like, I don't think I'm unique in that regard because, you know, the way that patriarchy has affected the Black household and the Black family has often put Black women in the role of like teaching boys how to be men, you know. Without having a lived experience in that, I think a lot of Black women feel, you know, so obligated and a lot of pressure to create Black men that fit this very patriarchal image. And you have a lot of overcorrection. So like, I never had a man tell me not to cry, but my aunts, that was their job. Like I never had men, you know, shut down my emotions. That was stuff I got from my aunts. Things like that complicate the way a lot of Black American men, or at least I'll just speak for myself, kind of engage with the nuances of what it means to be a Black man, because they did that for a reason. Those are useful traits to have picked up.
Something to me that I, thankful to my African roots, I don't get pressed that much by my mother about, or like my father or anyone in my family, for having long hair and pink dreadlocks and wearing earrings and things like that. When my sister got an earring when she was like 8, I remember just like tugging on my mom's like dress and I was like crying. I was like, I want an earring too. I want an earring too. My mom was like, yeah, just hop on the chair. Like no like other questions.
Oh wow. Yeah, that would never have happened.
Yeah. So it's like, so I feel like there's a very weird experience where I only embody the perceptions of anti-Blackness in normative society rather than the Black culture itself. So I might have like a very different conjuration of that. Because for me, it was an interesting experience because I didn't have you on YouTube growing up, or like T1J or anyone. Yeah. I think we talked about this before. I had pickup line books and the alpha male content to try to like reaffirm my masculinity. And eventually I just learned that it was corny, you know. Yeah. But like, and me talking to women as myself is just way more effective than me going to a girl and asking like, did you just
having a skit?
Like, you know, like, but it was a jarring experience to learn that what I was trying to embody was like a detriment to me, because I already knew aggressiveness and things like that was the thing I had to stay away from just because of like racialization of like myself. But like it was kind of eye-opening. Like, I know this is kind of weird, but it was kind of eye-opening learning that you have to humanize women. And I know it's like awful.
It sounds awful, but that's like patriarchy does that shit.
Yeah. But like growing up, you know, the images of masculinity you see is just like sex. And because I wasn't having sex like my peers or anything, I thought it was or
how your peers presented themselves to be having. Because most of us weren't, you know.
Yeah. And it made my masculinity intertwined with, okay, I need to get sex. But then when I started, I guess, intertwining my masculinity with other things, with like Playboy Cardi was a really big thing for me growing up, and Lil Uzi and that generation of SoundCloud rappers that kind of twisted masculinity into a more healthy way. Still has a lot of problems with it, but like a more healthy way.
Yeah. Or at least it expanded the scope of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Then that's when I started like growing my dreads out, because it became like pop culture to be like cool to have like long dreads again, and I was like, I kind of really like that. Grew my dreads out, dyed my hair, did things like that are still in tandem with like, I guess, patriarchal notions of black masculinity in my generation, at least. I guess like 30 years down, that would be seen as like more queer, like centered. What was it like learning what you've been socialized is a toxic byproduct like patriarchy?
I didn't really get that till much later in life. Well, I didn't understand it as patriarchy. What I noticed was, so first thing is, I've always been an empath, and I've always like not liked how women were treated in society overall. You know, so I've always noticed stuff like that. Like I remember in middle school, like watching guys grope girls for fun. You know what I'm saying?
We had a weird thing like that too here. It was called like Slap Ass Friday, and I had to be like banned from schools.
All kinds of stuff like that. They had this game. They would literally grab a girl's nipples and yell something random, like a random challenge.
Oh my God.
It'd be like, name 3 candy bars. And this was the thing. And I remember thinking, so part of me, to be honest, part of me was like, I want to grab boobs. But the other part was like, she didn't ask for that? This like seems like it hurts. This seems bad, you know. And another part of me knew not to say that, because then I would be rendered, you know, other by the other men and boys, right? So like, as a young person, I always knew something was wrong there. It just didn't quite, you know, I didn't have a black feminist framework to like kind of process that out. As I became a young adult, what I recognized was a lot of the young men that I knew who had the most toxically masculine traits were kind of getting fucked up in the game. Like, you know, they had that kid right out of high school, during high school, first year of college. You know, they didn't learn certain disciplinary habits, just little things that was like, all right, clearly this was like a cool thing, you know, when we were 16, but you know, this is now I may be on the better pathway here. And then the biggest change was when I had my son. And by then I had been teaching for years, and I was noticing like how much the boys needed me in the schools I was in. They needed me there. Like it was because I wasn't like a rah guy. And so I had so many boys gravitate to me because I was a male figure that was affectionate and that was warm and like kind to them. And I wasn't like forcing them to perform this dogmatic masculine dance in order to receive like, you know, approval, right? And so like that started to kind of like, man, these boys need this. And then I had some young gay men, and I was never like super homophobic, like, you know, type of guy, but I was also very careful about how I was perceived in a masculine, you know, as a masculine man. And so I would like, in my head, create a safe enough distance from the young gay boys, but also recognize that they needed me too. And then recognize that nobody was rocking with them. Like they were completely ostracized from male approval for the most part, which I realized sucked in retrospect. And then I also saw how they were victimized in ways that nobody cared about. You know, there's one boy that I'm really confident was caught up in sex trafficking, and another boy that was kicked out of his house and was living with, I guess they call them like house moms situation. I don't know if you've seen like Pose. I may be using that term wrong, but somebody be able to make it make sense on the back end. You know, like stuff like that. And I'm like, man, these boys are super unprotected. And it's just okay, right? So then I have my son, or my son's on the way, I should say. And so I'm talking to every man I know with a son, especially every father I know. And like, I'm getting good stuff. I'm getting stuff that's not so good. I'm getting plenty of like, bruh, I don't know. This shit is I'm still practicing. But like that forced me on like to a lot of self-reflection. I was also going through a little bit in my marriage at the time and in grad school. So like there's a period between, I guess, like a year before my wife is pregnant to like right when my second son is born. That's about a 4-year period. And in that period of time, me and my wife just had some tumult, especially when you're having new kids, like in and out. I'm start grad school, so I'm reading Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and stuff, right? And then I'm also like, oh shit, I just made a human with a penis. You know what I'm saying? And like, so like that means it's on me. Like if I had a daughter, I could be like, hey babe, figure that out. But like, no, like I got a penis, he got a penis. That means I'm supposed to figure this shit out. And it's hitting me how these things that have trauma, that, you know, were traumatic moments for me as a boy have affected the way I moved as a man. As I start to pair that with, and this is me at 30, you know what I mean? So as I start to pair that with like my readings and like talking to my wife and like legit saying to myself, I don't want him to have to go through that. I want him to be have a life and an experience as a boy that is fully human. And that means I have to model that as best as possible and also know how to peep when people are trying to dehumanize my son and force him into that stoic boyhood. You know what I'm saying? So like my brother, who we don't talk much no more, you know, he brought his daughter over. My son picked up one of his daughter's dolls and said, hey, put that down. You don't play with that. I was like, nope. You do what you feel like you is best. Don't tell my son how to play with toys. You know what I'm saying? It's a little stuff like that has been the biggest like thing for me. Is I want to end that cycle as much as possible. But also then the flip side, I don't ramble. I'll leave it at this. The flip side is also, especially with my sons, knowing that in some ways I am not doing my best job because I'm gonna have to find ways to teach them how to perform toxicity and to perform Black masculinity that will not make them targets and ostracized in certain spaces. That people are gonna, regardless of how they feel on the inside, that double consciousness is there. And so my oldest looks just like me. Got locks and everything. And so like he's gonna end up being a big guy, I can kind of tell. So it's like, yeah, people are gonna come to you and be like, lift this. Fight this person. You know, whatever. He's gonna be like, yo, I'm a chef. You know, some shit like that. And it's like, I gotta, that's the other fear, is that like I'm teaching him how to be fully human, but maybe the world isn't ready for fully human Black boys. So am I setting him up for failure? You know what I mean?
Okay, this kind of leads into like the last question I wanted to ask, but I'm kind of at a crossroads with this question because it's the question is, how has unpacking your concepts of patriarchy hindered you in everyday life?
No, that's a good question, but go ahead.
Both benefited me and also made me feel very belittled. It's this thing, it's this very weird insinuation of like, I know like delving into it in a toxic sense and drawing power from it is like a very inherently like bad thing to do, but in some ways it can be positive. Like when I'm lifting, you know, or like when I'm working out, like I've gained like 20 pounds in the last 4 months, and that's a really like big thing for me, you know, because I've always been like skinny my whole life. So like having that image of like fitting that mold of masculinity of just like being more muscular and more bigger, that kind of like in turn makes me feel better and reaffirms a lot of my insecurities. And like even to like that extent of racialization, if I didn't have these, if I did go back to like a law firm and did an internship, did go back to school, I would have to cut my dreads off and I would have to switch my whole way of speaking in a professional space, because I don't be saying cracker when I'm
at a law firm. It's like cracker law firm.
Yeah.
cracker.
I cannot be doing that over there. So like to an extent it is I do have to limit myself, my expression of masculinity in certain spaces to perceivably help the extents in tandem with how those people internalize my blackness, you know. But off the screen, this is a very freeing experience because I can be as ungendered as I want, you know. So like I do feel for like a lot of people that can't do that and that are in these spaces that they have to contain aspects of their masculinity or inflate aspects of their masculinity in order to be you know, I guess maybe their partner is pushing very patriarchal implications on them. They're like, hey, I want you to be like this. So then they start acting like that. Like one time, I know I vent sometimes about like
no, it's fine.
my internal patriarchal problems, like with you guys, like behind the camera sometimes. But like,
no, that's why we're here, man.
Yeah. One thing that was really hard for me was discerning the role of my masculinity in my relationship, you know, because I still want to be, like, as toxic as it is, I still want to provide for my family because like my dad's somewhere in Sudan.
There's nothing toxic about that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because my wife wants to provide for our family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, that's where it gets complex. I think the first thing to consider in that is just how underdeveloped this conversation is in terms of how men and boys experience patriarchy. The failure of, you know, the academia, and this is, you know, probably somewhat systematically designed, is that, and not just academia, but also like to an extent left to, you know, like all the places where this conversation should be being had and it's not.
Yeah,
that's a big failure, right? It's much easier and much more comfortable to consider patriarchy as this one-way relationship between men and women, and what we really should be looking at is patriarchy as a specific thing, and then having relational impacts on men and women, and then there's an arrow between men and women. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then there should be like a curve going back from women to men, and like we don't think about it like that. We just say we put patriarchy and men in the same bubble and then point to women. And so what that means is that our like engagement with how we experience the limiting and oppressive forces of patriarchal thought are underdeveloped. And I get why, because we don't have the same level of fear. We don't have the same level of risk under patriarchy as women do. And also so many people, so many men and boys will learn these words and code words and then use them to dominate, abuse, victimize other people. They'll learn it's the tools of the masters and whatever. So there's that first, right? And so I think what a lot of men are experiencing is in that same like realm of like, yo, this kind of sucks. And I'm trying to find the words to explain that to you. It is hard for a lot of women to engage with that from men, especially men in whom they're attracted to classically, traditionally masculine or sometimes toxic or patriarchal things. My wife, the running joke now, because my wife quit her job last summer. My wife made more money than me most of our relationship. Like since we had kids, my wife has made more money than me. My son is 9. And that never bothered me. But like in the last couple of years, it started to bother her. Not specifically that I didn't make enough money, but that she just was like, yo, I'm tired of these jobs. And I'm like, damn, well, we gotta eat, baby. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever. And so like when YouTube started really coming through with checks, I was like, hey, you know, you can stop working. And initially it was hard for her because she wanted to be a provider for her family, right? Because that's not an explicitly masculine thing in terms of like just loving and caring about people. But after she understood that she didn't have to and that she could provide in other ways and support me in my work, the running joke became, look at you protecting and providing. And she knows that gets on my nerves. But she talks to me like fucking like damn Steve Harvey. She be doing Steve Harvey impersonations around the house to like mess with me.
There's a little joke with like me and like my girlfriend too. Like when I give her gifts, like sometimes she'll be like, "Okay, sugar daddy," and I'll be like, like no.
Yeah, because we've also eroticized that relationship, which is the thing that like there's a lot there that I'm not going to even try to like get into or get in trouble. But you know what I'm talking about. We've eroticized the power dynamic So I say that, and then the other thing I want to get at is how getting into this space where you start to deconstruct and maybe even queer your masculinity can also put you in a weird limbo as a man. Because, you know, the women, there's a lot of women, I think it's better in your generation, right? And it's just like, and better now in general. But like traditionally, a lot of women would not accept men who don't, you know, present that classically masculine presentation. And so there's that problem. Then there's men that will reject you from community because you're not performing masculinity appropriately. It's hard for me to be in community with other men who got their shit together. Because like I be in community with dudes and it's like, yo, you an abuser, yo, you wild, yo, you're a misogynist. And like, I don't even feel like being around you. And it's like, you get a community of men that aren't like that, that's special. You know what I'm saying? And so like a lot of us end up, you know, with less friends, you know, because patriarchy is life.